Hey, what's up?
The fuck?
Flame, you are substantially not getting these jokes, huh? Are they too subtle?
Yeah, man, you are very hard to substitute.
I know I can sometimes be quite sublime, but don't act like a subordinate and submit your own ideas then.
Dude, shut the fuck up and talk about the subsequent order of talents, gear rotation, and... Yeah,
And subscribes if you haven't. Alright, really quick before we get into talents. If you find our guides useful and generally enjoy our content, you may want to consider checking out our Patreon. Some of the tiers will net you some kick-ass custom-made desktop wallpapers with your WoW character on them. And since YouTube has started demonetizing some of our videos, we thought it would be a good idea to remind you that we do have a Patreon and it helps us improve quality, pay the bills, and carry on making the vids. Check it out. Maybe you'll find something you like. Alright, in single target and raids, you want Weapon Master, as this will provide your backstab and shadow strike a 15% chance to strike twice. And on top of a decent increase in damage, the second strike also provides combo points, so you cannot really go wrong with Weapon Master. For Mythic Plus, you'll be going with Premeditation, enabling your shadow strike, after entering Stealth in Shadowlands, to activate Slice and Dice for 10 seconds. If you already have Slice and Dice up, then Shadow Strike will extend its duration by 10 seconds and you get 2 bonus combo points. As you always want to maintain Slice and Dice, this talent provides high value, making your Slice and Dice management a bit more passive. And since you will spend more time in dungeons on using Shuriken Storm instead of Shadow Strike, this talent is a good choice, allowing you to extend your most important maintenance buff with one use, instead of relying on using Shadow Strike as often as possible like Weapon Master. Glue Blade is just not worth it at the moment because although it bypasses armor and drops the requirement for positioning, its damage just pales when compared to the other two options. Second row gives you Shadow Focus for both raids and dungeons. Why? Because your abilities will cost 20% less energy while in Stealth or in Shadowlands, and this really smoothens out the playstyle of sub, especially if you just pick the spec up. Shadowlands increased the duration of Shadow Dance from 5 to 8 seconds, and a lot of new subs seem to struggle with energy and downtime, and in this regard, the other two options, Night Stalker and Subterfuge, just add to this issue rather than address it. Sure, on paper, Night Stalker should boost up DPS more, but in reality, you need as much space as possible for your Shadow Strikes and Eviscerates in terms of energy, and Shadow Focus gives you just that. Speaking of smooth playstyle, the third row provides some good choice. The general consensus is that you go with Deeper Stratagem as the clearest DPS boost and viability for both raids and dungeons. It's simple, you get a maximum of 6 instead of 5 combo points and a passive damage bonus to all of your finishers. There's little reason to consider the other options in group content, but Mark for Death can be fun in world content, or Thorghast if you can reset the cooldown very often. Fourth row brings one of the best talents for players like Flame, who sometimes just feel this attraction to stand in shit and die. Well, Cheat Death is here to save you and Flame because once every 6 minutes, fatal damage will reduce you to 7% of your max HP, and 3 seconds after that, you take 80% reduced damage. You see, it has a save mechanic just in case you didn't realize you were sitting in that frontal. In the name of Flame and all players who take frontals in the Ketha, we thank you WoW devs for this amazing talent. It is worth noting that Cheat Death does not appear to be perfectly bug-free though. Sometimes mechanics like dots do not seem to be reduced properly, which can cause you to die right after Cheat Death saved you anyway. If you know exactly when you want to reduce damage more predictably, Elusiveness is a great alternative, and since rogues are very squishy in Shadowlands, Soothing Darkness is the option that provides some welcome self-heal in any content. For the next talent row, the options are quite situational, so in general, for dungeons you want to go with Shot in the Dark, as this will net you a cost-free cheap shot after going in Stealth or in Shadowlands, and can prove useful when you want to stun multiple mobs in Shadowlands without such a big penalty on the energy cost. Alternatively, in necrotic or raging weeks, you could opt for Night Terrors in order to help your tank kite easier. This will apply a 30% slow to your Shuriken Storm for 8 seconds that is more reliable than the random chance of proc and crippling poison. Prey on the Weak is the only DPS increase here, and it usually works well in raids when fighting trash or important focus targets. Shade of Torghast. Also an option in dungeons when all of the earlier arguments are not valid, like your team has enough CC and there is no scary weak for tanks. Next up we have Enveloping Shadows as the best option across the board. You remember when we talked about having a smooth rotation such? Well, this talent adds to that because you get an additional charge to Shadowlands and it always adds 0.5 seconds to the cooldown reduction on your passive Deepening Shadows, allowing you not only 2 charges of Shadowlands, but more frequent access to it as well. The idea of Dark Shadow for a more bursty playstyle is great, but does not work out currently because the Shadowlands rework of only having 1 Shadowlands charge baseline made the second buffer charge from Enveloping Shadows too dominant for everything. Last Row brings you Master of Shadow for the same smooth rotation argument you should be familiar with by now. This will generate 25 energy for 3 seconds after you pop your Shadow Dance or just enter stealth. Needless to say, it helps with energy management and it's great for raiding and even in dungeons in Tyrannical Weeks, for example. If you want some pure AoE goodness, pick Secret Technique, an extra finisher that deals a good chunk of damage to your primary target and cleave to the targets around it for 50% of that damage. Not only that, but after 1 second, 2 clones will appear and mirror your attack on the target. What's also cool is that its base cooldown of 45 seconds is reduced based on the combo points you spend. Shuriken Tornado can possibly work in very niche situations when you have high priority targets within AoE groups, but I say we stick to the safe picks and retain Master of Shadows or Secret Technique for dungeons. Ah yes, stats for Sub-Rogue. Truth be told, you should always sim yourself for the best possible results, but when looking from a bird's eye view, versatility and crit are always great, while haste and mastery vary and jump places with the numbers of targets from single target to AoE. Item level is your numero uno prioridad, because agility, yes, your main stat is the most important because it gives you attack power and that is what your abilities scale off when producing damage in the first place. Versatility and critical strike are very close to each other and usually the top secondary stats for sub-rogues. Both increase damage from all sources in their own way, with crit being responsible for cool big yellow numbers on the screen and versatility being a bit more generic. It provides some damage reduction too, of course. Haste is valuable in more subtle ways as it increases energy regeneration, rupture ticks, and attack speed. The additional attack speed alongside Slice and Dice leads to more shadow techniques and poison procs. Haste is a fine stat on single target that tends to fall a bit behind against more targets where the rotation is less energy demanding and auto attacks lose some importance. Mastery empowers all of your finishers and can often be a part of getting those big eviscerate numbers to brag with. Usually, it is simming the lowest on single target though and can be seen swapping stat places with haste against multiple targets. Keeping this in mind, your enchants should always be Celestial Guidance on your main dagger for that nice agility proc, and either Lightless Force for AoE focus content or Sinful Revelation for single target focus content on the other dagger. Lightless Force will occasionally throw a wave of shadow energy hitting your first 5 targets, while Sinful Revelation will cause a target to get an extra 5% damage from your abilities for 10 seconds. Your gems and enchants will be either Tenet of Critical Strike and Deadly Jewel Cluster for crit increases, or Tenet of Versatility and Versatility Jewel Cluster for versatility. Pick what you prefer, or even better, what seems higher for you. However, remember that versatility also adds a little bit of a defensive bonus. This can help during progression. If you come from the simplicity of Battle for Azeroth, don't forget that there are more enchant slots again. While some are more optional or defensive, you do want to make sure that you at least get your Eternal Agility enchant on the boots and Eternal Stats or Eternal Skirmish on the chest. Always get yourself some Spectral Flasks of Power for an extra agility gain while pairing it up with a potion of Phantom Fire for single target that works great with Shadow Core Oil, by the way, get that too, or for dungeons, potion of Spectral Agility and Shaded Sharpening Stone. That being said, I have to say that stones are generally the better DPS increase, while small, still an increase for all content. In general terms, you want Feast as your main food of choice, but if there's someone in this game who understands you when you cannot afford it, that is me. Hey man! So if there is no one generous enough to place down a table of Feast, go for steak à la mode. Oui, c'est très bien. That's French for it's very good, if you want that versatility buff. But if you have the crit munchies, then go for spine soufflé and fry. Alright, Covenants baby! Before we dive into them, it's worth noting that for rogues, all Covenants are usually very close, and so are the Covenant abilities. If anything, numerical choice is defined by the soulbinds, but even there the impact is often as small as that of choosing a race when creating a character. Covenants define your home zone for the expansion, so picking what you enjoy is absolutely fine. We just want to highlight one here. Kyrian remains a great all-rounder for Subtlety Rogue, with Pelagos being the one soulbind to invest in. Before we get into the conduits, let's check out Echoing Reprimand, the Kyrian's DPS signature ability. This does great damage up front at a very cheap energy cost, and it also generates 2 combo points. The intricacy of this spell is that it will mark your 2nd, 3rd, or 4th combo point with an overcharged combo point. After this, you have 45 seconds to generate combo points at exactly that spot, and if you do, when you hit a damage-dealing finisher, it will act as if 7 combo points were used, which is great for DPS increase, but really, you shouldn't focus too much on it, especially on AoE fights. I mean, sure, the DPS is great, but in reality, due to the passive shadow techniques, you are very likely to overpass the overcharge combo point quite often, and focusing too much on it will lose you out on burst windows or force you to use an undetended eviscerate on 3 combo points. Just know that in that 45-second window, you will almost always have at least 1 hit for the overcharge combo point, and that should be enough. Out of the 3 soulbinds of Kyrian, Pelagos still seems to be the best due to the interaction from Echoing Reprimand and Combat Meditation, the first passive of the 3. While not impressive, it's still a DPS increase due to the good chunk of mastery it provides once you press Echoing Reprimand. Always take note of the 3 small orbs that spawn due to this, because once you go through them, you extend the duration of the buff, netting you even more DPS. As for conduits, we shall look at the potency ones first, so you can raise up your DPS. First one is Planned Execution. This will enable your Symbols of Death to increase your critical strike chance, and since you very much value crit, it is the top choice. Your second potency slot should be filled by Stiletto Staccato, a very nice way to reduce the cooldown of your Shadow Blaze by 1 second from the passive shadow techniques. Basically, every time your auto attacks generate a combo point, you reduce the cooldown of Shadow Blaze, and since this has a 3-minute cooldown, having access to it faster equals, you guessed it, more damage. There is not much on offer when it comes to endurance conduits, but one of the more useful ones is Recuperator, adding a nice heal over time effect to your slice and dice. Ah, the good old days of Recuperate. I guess this conduit tries to be reminiscent of that. For finesse, nothing too dramatic, but a good one to have in all scenarios is Quick Decision, as this will increase the range of your Shadow Step and reduce its cooldown. Now, since we've had our foot into Shadowlands for over 3 months now, we can safely look at great performing trinkets for dungeons. The first one being Inscrutable Quantum Device from the Other Side, also known as the trinket. On a 3-minute cooldown, once activated, this will net you a very strong stat boost. Problem is, you have to predict what that stat could be, rendering its use somewhat inconsistent but beneficial nevertheless. Second is File of Putrefaction, which you will get from Plaguefall. This will have your auto attacks apply a dot every 5 seconds and it stacks 3 times. pretty good when going on priority targets in dungeons and then switching to other mobs. For raiding, of course we'll have to mention Dreadfire Vessel as probably the best performing trinket, but good luck getting it. It drops from side to Natchez, and on a 1 minute and 30-second cooldown, it will blast your target with a good chunk of fire damage. But hey, maybe with the drop rate increases, you can make use of this earlier on, so go get to killing the Nathries. Another very well performing trinket is the Skulker's Wing, which drops from the very first boss of Nathria, Shriekwing, so this should be easier to get. Once used, you gain a speed buff for 10 seconds, and you pounce to the next target that comes within 8 yards, dealing some big ass physical damage to it. This trinket is best used outside of clay situations, as it does tend to pounce randomly, so think of bosses like Slushfist, Shriekwing, Artificer, and so on. No clay. Now for legendaries. So if you're just starting out on your sub, after you gear a bit, go into the raid finder directly and get on the Natchez so you can learn the Finality legendary. This is basically an all-rounder legendary for sub-rogues, working great in cleaves, AoE, and decent in single target too. What it does is, after you use Eviscerate, Rupture, or Black Powder, your next Eviscerate, Rupture, or Black Powder will be buffed by 25%. And yes, the buffs can all be active, like you Eviscerate first, you have the 25% for that. Then you Black Powder, you also gain the buff for that, and so on. They activate, separately, don't cancel each other. Now, if you're a dedicated dungeoneer and want to push high keys, Mark of the Master Assassin is something to have in your bags too. Finality can do well for pushing, no doubt, but Mark just gives you a guaranteed crit chance for 4 seconds after getting out of stealth, and dungeons can allow you to re-stealth often. Besides, crits of Shuriken Storm will apply Find Weakness to all your targets, and then Black Powders will hit them harder, thus more damage for you! There's an argument to be made for Akari's Soul Fragment too. It is technically the strongest legendary for pure single target. The main reason it is not seeing as much play as Finality in raids is that usually pure single target is not that common, where Finality is great in every situation. For the rotation, we're going to take into account that you're playing Kyrian with the suggested talents and legendaries talked about previously, and please always remember to check your poisons before any fight. The main idea is to pair up Shadowlands with symbols and build up combo points while spending them at 5+ combo points. Now for the opener, you go into stealth. Engage the boss with Shadow Strike, then slice and dice if it's not up already from premeditation, otherwise use Rupture. Then use Shadow Blaze and Symbols of Death at the same time, then use Echoing Reprimand, enter Shadowlands, and then follow the next priorities. Please note that this is not the order in which you press your abilities, but rather the importance they have once they become available. This part here is made to give you a graphical representation, so don't mind the energy and combo point overcapping, okay? First on the priority is Shadow Blaze on cooldown, of course. Then Vanish on cooldown. Next, maintain Slice and Dice and try to refresh it before your Shadow Dance comes back up. Next is maintaining Rupture on your primary target, and same as Slice and Dice, try to refresh it before Shadow Dance. Then use Symbols of Death paired up with Shadow Dance, and always try to be at 60 energy before this, so you get as much energy as possible. Next on the priority is Eviscerate with 5+ combo points. And lastly, Shadow Strike when in Shadow Dance, or Backstab when out of it, to generate combo points. Always remember to position yourself in the back of your target to get the 20% extra damage for it. Backstab. Get it? For multi-target, you first have to always make sure to maintain Slice and Dice. If there are 6 or more mobs, then forget about it completely. Then maintain Rupture only if you know that your main target will live for more than 12 seconds. Next, use Symbols of Death paired up with Shadow Dance and Secret Technique if there are 3 or more targets, and you are still in Shadow Dance. Use Shuriken Storm, cast Black Powder as the main spender at 5+ combo points, again when facing 3 or more mobs. And finally, use Shuriken Storm to generate them combo points. If you play the Mark of the Assassin legendary, remember to open up with Shuriken Storm when facing 3 or more mobs, so you can apply Find Weakness to all of them. Then go into your Shadow Dance and other priority abilities. However, keep in mind that if you pick Premeditation, Shadow Strike after entering Stealth or Dance extend your Slants and Dice. This means you can fall back to using one Shadow Strike to consume the buff for the extension in smaller AoE situation. So here's an example of the priority and rotation with the opener in single target. This is on the Hungering Destroyer. We're doing an alt raid on Heroic. So right off the bat, I'm in stealth. I'm opening up with Shadow Strike, then Slice and Dice. Then I pop my Shadow Blades and Symbols, use my Echoing Reprimand, then pop Shadow Dance immediately and Shadow Strike to get 6 combo points, Eviscerate, and then again Shadow Strike, Eviscerate again. And as soon as my Shadow Dance falls off, I use Backstab and then apply Rupture. Then I immediately go back into my Shadow Dance, again Shadow Strike, Eviscerate, and so on. So this is just to get an idea on how you should open up and carry on in single target as Subtlety Rogue with the Finality legendary. Now let's move along to some AoE madness. So here I know I have a target that will live for more than 12 seconds, right? So once I open here with Shadow Strike, I immediately place Rupture on this bad boy, and then Shadow Dance and Symbols, then Shuriken Storm, and use Black Powder to buff my next Black Powder, and then I Shuriken Storm, and then Secret Technique. After this is basically Shuriken Storm, Black Powder. Obviously, we pop Shadow Dance once again, Shuriken Storm 2 times to get to 6 combo points, Black Powder, right? I didn't see the necessity to use here Shadow Blades, so I refreshed my Slice and Dice because that's important to keep up in AoE. I keep on doing this. I use Vanish, of course, on the priority to get one more opener with Shadow Strike on the big boy, and then carry on once again with Shuriken Storms and Black Powder. You should always use Secret Technique during Shadow Dance, remember that. There is much more to Subtlety than we can possibly catch in a 20-minute video, so I strongly recommend checking out the Ravenhall Discord for even more info, where lots of mythic sub-rogues, theory crafters are more than willing to answer questions and help out. One of which is our boy Mistler, who not only is a sub-rogue god, but he's also a developer for Simcraft, Hero Damage, and Hero Rotation. He helped us fact-check the guide, added some nice tips, and is an overall awesome human being. You can check him out on his Twitter or Twitch too, and all links are in the description, including his Sub-Rogue Wowhead guide. You can check that out too. A big salute to our Patreon fam for carrying the torch on Marcelian&Online content, supporting 2 class guides per week, the TLF show on Fridays, and the MoCast podcast. Big love also to our Discord fam and Twitch fam, you know, the viewers, the followers, the subs, all that on twitch.tv/MarcelianOnline, where we stream 5 days a week. And last but not least, thank you for watching the video. Hope it helped. And see you soon!
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classical retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.